Welcome in everybody to Spectre and Spooks. Today we have our second episode, and I am here with my lovely co-host Kimberly Horn, founder of Horn Paranormal Research and also a intuitive medium in her own right. I am Brooke Ashley, an intuitive evidential medium, paranormal investigator as well. And we have here today with us Toby Johnson, and I'm so excited because Toby Johnson is pretty big in the Bigfoot world. So we are going to talk all things Bigfoot today. Maybe we'll steer off of Bigfoot a little bit, who knows, but really excited to get into it today. And I'm going to introduce Toby Johnson. Hi, Toby. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm calling you from my research vehicle, which in this case is a 2009 Prius. And so we will call this clandestine operation from Project Fred Meyer.
I like it. That's a long title, but it's a good one. You know, no one else will have that title. So, Toby, I would love to have the audience get to know you a little bit better. So before we get into some of these really cool aspects of your life inside of the Bigfoot genre and all of your research and your books and your YouTube channel and everything else that you've been kind of involved with, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
Well, if you ask Grok, it says all sorts of things about me. Some are true, most are not. But for the most part, the heart of the matter is that I grew up in a little sleepy lumber town called Springfield, Oregon, just off the I-5 near Eugene, Oregon. And I wandered into a circumstance with my son where we found an initial foot find, we'll call it, an interesting, what looked like bipedal step. In this case, it was a single track that was heading into a blackberry bramble in the little town of Thurston, Oregon. And I was just instantly fascinated with the idea that this could be something more than a hoax. And that came from like a lifelong devotion to looking into mysteries. Like I loved X-Files. My favorite movie is Close Encounters of the Third Kind, In Search of, Monster Quest, all these things. I was an only child with a huge imagination. And it turns out that I gave birth to such a person as well, my son Jude. And so when father and son found a single trackway that looked like a human barefooted track in the icy mud, it didn't matter if it was hoax, because the larger question was, damn, maybe some of this could be real. Let's go talk to people and build a narrative between father and son where we could open our minds and enjoy the what if factor. And how deep can we go down the rabbit hole? And it turns out we went pretty damn deep. At least Dad did. And so that was circa 2005-06 time frame. So where are we at now? Almost 20 years later? Well, about that. And so, yeah, I've got a lot of opinions, and then I've got a lot of like facts, like things that can't be erased, like the reality of the mythos and why it's so damn elusive.
Right. It definitely is elusive. And I think that people have so many different theories. I feel like all of which are very plausible. I mean, the theory of Bigfoot being an interdimensional being, all sorts of different things. What's your take, or throughout your research, what do you feel the most close to when it comes to some of these different ideas about Bigfoot?
Well, initially, Brooke and Kimberly, again, nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Bet.
On the library shelves at public schools and pretty much any bookshelf from Barnes and Noble to Powell's bookstore to, just on anybody's shelves are categories of books that belong in sections. So if you go down the metaphysical aisle, it'll start leaning into all these books on metaphysics that have to do with different parts of consciousness and what I would call mystery schools. And Bigfoot is lopped into the category of all these mystery schools, including ESP and, of course, cryptozoology and specters and earth mysteries in general, life after death. And maybe that's because it belongs in that category, period. Not because it's just a mystery school, because all this stuff is interconnected. And that's what my hunch was, is that this was interconnected into all of these other mysteries. But there is this physical aspect of the phenomena where footprints and biologics are collected on site constantly, to the point where the average Joe has no idea why they're a skeptic at all, because they have not addressed the biological forensic evidence of what has been found. And so there's the conundrum, because it's a little bit different than the world of the non-human entities, such as those who have passed on. It's more of an ethereal concept, right? There's more ambiguity, let's put it to that.
Yeah.
And then we get into like the space people. If there is physical evidence, it's so compartmentalized in clandestine programs that we don't know about it. We have to only guess and wait for the DoD to express the truth for us on our behalf. As where Sasquatch bypasses all these things and says, come visit me. And if you want physical evidence and you invest enough gas money and tread on the trail, you will walk away with forensic physical evidence that confounds modern day science.
Yeah, that's pretty, it's compelling stuff. I know that you did a like a short called Al Moon Labs, and it talks about you. Yeah, it's really good. Watched it, very compelling. And you have a very good narrative voice, Toby, as well. So it makes it compelling listening to it. But talking about where you come from, what got you into this. But I saw on there that it's not just one track that you found. It seems as though you have come across a handful of tracks. So could you talk a little bit about where those were located and how you were called in to handle those?
Well, it was eagerness. It took me about 3 years to be completely addicted to this, to the point where I would drop everything just based upon a hunch or a phone call. Or I was so hungry for the fact that this stuff was happening right outside my back door, and the phenomena was adding up to make sense. Like it was expressing itself that this is supernatural. But yet there could be the forensic stuff. And so I was trying to basically bring people over to the dark side, which in this case is the woo. And so I had a lot of friends the first 3 years that are on, these cable network shows, and they're just beating their heads up against the wall because they can't figure this damn issue out. But yet it seemed like the Native Americans did years ago and had warned me as well, that this is a human type spiritual being that is celebrated on the Pacific Northwest totem poles as being a living being, because they put it at the base of the totem pole where the power animal is, along with other real animals like beaver, coyote, and such. But yet there is this otherness to them all. So when it came to footprints, that seems like a good place to start, right? Like, let's collect footprints. How do you do it? Where are they at? And so I started looking for them on my own based upon really old reports. We call them class A through C reports, visuals and sounds and feelings, short sightings, less than 5 seconds. But if I could get there, maybe that was a hot spot. Maybe that was a thoroughfare of some kind where frequency happened with the phenomena. And so going to places that have place names, that have strange sounding names, like Baboon Creek. That's a pretty strange name. Why is there baboons being brought up in the wilderness? Or Devil's Ridge. All these things got their names for a reason. And a lot of them on the older maps are a lot better than the newer maps on your phone, perhaps. So I started accessing old maps. And so between that and being what I would call like an ambulance chaser, following up on these old reports, I started to find stuff. It started making sense. Not everything was castable. Like when I say that, I mean like you put like a tape measure next to the impression that's 14.5 inches, which is the general size of a Sasquatch track,
Okay.
and about 1.5 to 2 inches deep on forest floor, 5 feet apart between the heel to where the toes begin from left to right foot. So that's pretty big spread. That's like, a parking spot here at the Fred Meyers, parking lot.
Okay.
So very big, and walking in a line. So throwing their foot in a tightrope fashion, it's called a compliant gait. And so
Okay.
nobody walks like that, right? Like nobody walks on
Yeah.
a tightrope, but these things do. And so I knew what to look for. And so the real McCoy, I believe, started to present itself in the little town of Cottage Grove, Oregon. And so that was probably where most of this hardcore obsession with not only the area of Cottage Grove, Oregon began, but also like, I want to be the best damn plaster caster of Bigfoot tracks that I can be. So I'll carry with me at all times. I'll always have it, a little Ziploc bag full of hydrocal or plaster in my backpack. And that makes a really interesting story to a police officer when they find a giant white bag of Ziploc powder sitting in your passenger seat.
Oh
It's a really interesting day.
Bring
So,
out the dogs.
right. So that's how it began.
Yeah. And
So
so, Kimberly, you have a question?
I was just going to go from there and ask you about Daryl and your relationship with him, because it sounds like from some of the YouTube I watched, you guys did a lot of casting together, and it kind of took it on its own little, it advanced a lot of things. Sounded like you had partners in crime helping you along the way.
Yeah. So Daryl was new to the subject matter. He was kind of baptized in it in the state of Oklahoma by his brother. And
that was my next question.
Right. So here's a retired construction worker that his retirement plan is to have a new hobby based upon his brother's interest. And he says, well, why don't you start going to these meetings and talking to people at these campouts and just meet them? You've lived in a haunted house, so you've done that kind of stuff before. And so getting a phone call or a message from Daryl saying, hey, aren't you the guys that cast those prints out on the lake bed that one year? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, I'd like to go back there. I moved like a mile away, and show me, if you want. I'd love to see the area. And so that started this friendship. And knowing where he lived and knowing how many stories about this area exist, I was like, well, if you're retired and I have all this off time right now, and I live just down the road as well, maybe we can actually find out if these tracks are real. Maybe we can actually have a sighting of the track maker. And so that was the hope. That was the only hope, is whether or not we could have a sighting of the phenomena, i.e. Bigfoot or orbs, plasmic balls of light, also called relic neutrinos, which are studied as ball lightning. Ball lightning seems to be intimately connected to top secret DoD stuff, as well as Sasquatch and UFOs and ghost. And so that's what I was interested
right now.
in. Yeah. So because it's totally tied to all these issues. You have all that presenting itself in at least 3 subjects, and it presents itself the same: cold spots, electromagnetic behavior, and different types of light phenomena, including small pinpricks to large explosions of light, and boxes of light. This was something relatively new to the world of the UAP phenomena, but even newer to the world of Sasquatch. But even weird shafts, rods of light, boxes of light in proximity and connected to Bigfoot.
Yeah, wonderful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this up, and I'd love for you to kind of talk about some of these projects you've been a part of here and the difference kind of between each one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I just wanted to send you something, Brooke, just based upon content here. So I thought I'd send you movie posters, things that I've been involved with. So during COVID, everyone took an important turn based upon what your priorities are in life. And my priority was to have more fun and do what I love. So I quit everything. I moved to Washington and immersed myself into everything my little heart could desire, including doing a podcast, doing live events, and also co-producing movies. And these are 3 of them here. And it kind of starts in the order you see on the screen, which is Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which is a personal narrative story that people can watch for free, I believe, on YouTube, Flash of Beauty, the YouTube channel. And it gets into a personal narrative connection on how people's lives have changed dramatically, how they culturally, how their worldview shifts, no matter where they are, be it, extreme areas of blue collar, white collar, doesn't matter. For the most part, I would say about 70% of the people that have a sighting, their life detours in a drastic direction, and not all of it's fun or good. I mean, if you look at the character of Roy Neary from from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, played by Richard Dreyfuss, if you understand that movie, it's also a Bigfoot story, and it's about a man's life who is misdirected by normal standards, right? Like he leaves his family and he's ready to hop in a mothership, and in fact, he does. So this is also the Bigfoot story, is that men also make drastic decisions to go in the woods. Maybe the other deep space is the deep woods. And so that's what we get into. And then, of course, the paranormal story is where my story really kicks into gear, because it is a paranormal story. And we talk about, along with other people as well, stories probably much more riveting as far as like, I don't know. I'm thinking of the ending scene in A Flash of Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot, where 2 construction workers see an 8-foot tall orangutan in Reedsport turn into a box of light and shoot off through the forest. That's hard to beat. So there's incredible stories there. And then you have our story, Daryl and mine, which is the story of this little farmhouse in Cottage Grove, Oregon, where we coined this name for the land called the Owl Moon Lab. And it really was just like paying homage to the full moon that was rising up when we found these damned knee impressions in the mud. And so I was like, well, if this is the Owl Moon and this is our first evidence here is, buds, and we're taking it down to your garage, maybe that's like our living laboratory. And so that's how it got its name.
Okay.
Nice. Love that. That's awesome. I think that I think if anybody is unaware of either Olympic Strange Days, which would be Toby's podcast, but also A Flash of Beauty, Bigfoot Revealed, which you can find on YouTube, both of these incredible channels on YouTube, and get a little bit more in depth with not only Toby's story, but other stories that have to do with Bigfoot. And I think it, like Toby said, can go a lot deeper than that. You know what I mean? And I think it's pretty fascinating. And I find that the takes that I've seen from those things, Toby, with you, with Olympic Strange Days, with Flash of Beauty, I find them to be such a deeper and more broad take or aspect of Bigfoot, because I think sometimes it can be such a halted subject. You know what I mean?
Well, it's just some of the stuff is just bad and dumb.
Yeah.
It's just like they've turned it into a cliche. And this is so not a cliche. It's hard not to even think that the government isn't involved with turning this into a dumbed down cliche of some kind, like they have with UFOs.
Right.
But it's way stupider to talk about Bigfoot than it is UFOs. Let's face it.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like a lot of people think that they're one and the same. You know what I mean? That's a theory, right? That
that's probably true. I mean, they seem to be like a person set apart on the boundaries, like the ultimate illegal alien. Like they're just constantly on the run, they're avoiding trouble for the most part, and they have these off-world powers. They're just like literally, they're like super ninja monkeys, but at the same time they have this ghostly alien aspect with this humanity that I've experienced up close, like 3 feet away from me. So yeah.
I love how you've taken the fringe science and the science and put it together, and that you still do your debunking and go through
Mm.
your normal things. Like you talk about chipmunks leaving gifts and different things, and bear tracks repeating themselves for people who don't know the wild. I love that.
Mm.
So people know that you're doing your due diligence, but then you still have that open mind to say, there's this whole other parallel stuff to it that we still don't know. I love that it's open like that.
Yeah.
Well,
I
thank
do.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, Toby, we should probably talk a little bit about one of your big projects, which was Expedition Bigfoot. I feel like a lot of people, if they don't know a lot about Bigfoot, they've at least seen some of the Expedition Bigfoot episodes. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that and the production and what was your role in those episodes?
Yeah, so this all started actually with finding Bigfoot. And we were kind of doing like location scouting because we were having these monthly meetings in the Cascades where people would show up and share with me a libation, some pizza, and a microphone. And they would tell a Bigfoot story at a place called Ike's Pizza. We called it Bigfoot and Beer. And that started kind of the round table, open forum concept for finding Bigfoot as they'd come to Ike's Pizza and they saw, oh my gosh, there's an audience, like a built-in Geraldo audience sitting here hearing these these exchanges of the paranormal, mainly Bigfoot. And so that's how I got involved with working with cable network, was setting up shots like that and finding witnesses. And then I think I try to handle myself in a way to where it seems like I'm reliable, maybe not totally dependable, but I'm earnest, right? And I try to be, I have a sense of humor about this. I try not to take it too serious. And I
Yeah.
see a lot of grown men, that have that have this ego about them, about this monkey, and their fathers, and they're out there acting like complete d-bags, online, saying stuff that's incredibly narcissistic. And it's just, if I ever got that way, it just drive me crazy. So I try not to come across that way. And I think cable network is dying for that kind of personality to be involved, even though they may not know it. The
Yeah.
audience
Yeah.
is hungry. They're hopefully hungry for authenticity. And so I think that's
I
why
think we're
I
going
got
that
that
way.
gig. Yeah. Is just trying to be authentic on camera as much as possible. And but that was a really, you're talking about working with Expedition Bigfoot now. So that was last year in Ferndale, California. And the invite was to work with Dr. Maria Mayer. And I was already a fanboy of her work because she is such a badass. Like she found a new species of lemur in Madagascar by like sleeping in a hammock at age, like, I don't know, she was like under 30, I think, for several nights alone in the jungle, hearing about rumors of a monkey that only locals said exists. There was no, evidence of this. And so as a primatologist looking into this, it was an easy fit for her to at least be approached, because she's like the new
Yeah.
Jane Goodall of looking into this stuff. But I didn't know what to expect. I'd never worked with a Hollywood type alone in the woods like this before. But like before we know it, we're just like old friends. And
nice.
that was really cool. And so she's definitely scientifically minded about this being explainable as what we would call a relic hominid. So like the fossil record goes here and it goes linear, and it never diverts into big stages of like, oh, these are like separately evolved ghost monkeys. That doesn't work for Maria. But I told her that like that's what I think. And so it played well on camera, I think. And we walked away with some really mystifying experiences that didn't all make it on camera. It never does. But at least, like I feel like I have a legitimate sister in this community that I'll see occasionally at conferences.
I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I also have some clips, Toby. These clips that you sent me, these are audio recordings of some of the stuff that you have captured. So do you mind if I play one and then you can kind of explain to us for each one what was going on here?
Yeah, just to set it up, by this time, I've already been invited to live full time on this parcel of like 2.5 acres in the front yard in my 14-foot Dutchman. And so there's an old ranch house and a metal shed. And then there's Toby living in the blackberry bushes in his trailer studying Bigfoot, like doing my own Jane Goodall impression. And so I'm hoping to habituate, that's the term we'll use here, and bring the phenomena in, because the word on the street is that there's blue-eyed bears on 2 legs walking out of the forest to these ranch houses. And that's really close to where a lot of footprints have been. And it's very close to the backside of the Umpqua Forest where people refuse to camp. Like good old boys with guns don't go camping behind Daryl's house. And the sounds you're about to play are the reason why.
Okay. Okay. Let's start here.
Okay. Well, so the context of that is you hear one individual making a sound. We can't even really call it more than that. We hear something that is making a sound. Now, why is that important? Well, it's not a language that's easily accessible on AI or Google Earth. It's not easily accessible language for any local in the Cottage Grove area. But why is that important? Let's just say it's an unknown language and I don't know it yet. Okay, cool. We could do that. But I like, am the bioacoustics guy and I like to look into stuff. So why are sounds important? Well, sounds, it turns out, are a lot more interesting than just waveforms. So like when you're looking at an EVP, electronic voice phenomena, you guys know what that is, and you're seeing it on a waveform, that's cool. Like I get it. Like you're hearing non-corporeal voices from beyond, perhaps. I don't fully believe that. But what if you look at it through something called spectrogram? And so there's different versions of spectrogram, but what spectrogram does, and you don't just need spectrogram to know that this voice is fishy, but spectrogram is free on a program called Audacity, and I like free. So if you download Audacity and put it on spectrogram in the left-hand setting, then you go into a program that shows the hertz level away from a waveform. And so when I say waveform, just picture like an EKG meter, beep, 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 right? Like an earthquake, a seismograph. That's what you're seeing. My voice fluctuate. You see it on podcasts occasionally on such. But this looks at sound as forensic evidence on the hertz level. And what it shows is it shows the inflection point underneath 1,000 hertz. This is the typical area we find Sasquatch language, because what you're hearing right now not only is below 1,000 hertz, at the end of that morphine stream, which is the cognates, the words put together, it has an emphatic or terminal ending. And so that is a conversation piece. This is what you do when you mean a point, is you say something and you express it with a terminal ending or like a punchline. And that has that. So that's why it's leaning into language, but also you can't make that noise with your voice at the end. We have an opera singer in our latest documentary, a very well-known one from California, that has forensically looked at some of these sounds. And he says these are organic sounds that cannot be reproduced by humans. I should know, I'm a professional opera singer. But like, if you're like a bioacoustics guy, you can see that these things are whipping a sound out of their lung capacity that could probably stun somebody. And this is what other, let's just say, animals, for the sake of conversation, can do. Like a whale can make a clicking sound that could explode your organs just with a single click. They can take a scuba diver's hand that accidentally touches a whale, and if they click at him, it will paralyze their hand for over an hour. So Sasquatch can do the same thing, witnesses will tell you about how whatever they've heard or seen, and sometimes they don't hear anything, but they're incredibly, sorry, there's a car alarm off, going off here. The point is that they can use sound to stun humans, and send them basically packing back to their vehicle. And these are things that I've witnessed before, and maybe they can do it with something called infrasound. I think that they can use their mind, and their sound. Sound is very interesting at a clandestine DoD interest too. And I just got off like a 3-day trip with Dr. Simeon Hein, and we had talked about this just last night, and he said something about phasers, which are basically sound lasers that the government uses. So you're basically combining sound and a laser to make things float. And so if you can use sound to make things levitate in concert with photons, this is getting closer to what I think Bigfoot can do with their mind. So where we need tools, these things can just freaking do because it's written in their DNA.
Right.
That's interesting. My
Yeah.
experience that I had when I made eye contact, I have never felt so much fear in my life. And I can't explain why. Reminded me of Blair Witch Project. I mean, I fell backwards and there was no reason for me to be that afraid. And that was what happened. So I've always been wondering, how could something project that onto another? But I know that it happened. So that's super interesting to me.
Same thing happened to my sister. She lived in Greenwater for 5 years, which is in Mount Rainier. And she had no one around. It was around COVID. And she literally lived in the middle of the forest inside of Greenwater, which is in Mount Rainier in the mountains. And behind her is this large river, but you can't see, you got to look through the trees and get through the trees to get to it. And it was COVID times. Nobody was out. All of the houses around her were empty because where she lived, it was a lot of people who were coming in just for the winter. So she was the only, one of the only locals out there who was there all year. And I remember she was so terrified. She said something came up to the side of her house and her dogs dropped to the floor, and it just said on the side of her house, everything came off of every shelf. She said that she peeked outside, same thing, a level of fear. She couldn't see anything. She was like, I didn't want to look any further because I was afraid I would see it. But the level of fear she felt, she didn't understand. It wasn't logical,
And, I don't know if I specifically have had what I would call the dread response from these. I've watched it take place before. And I've had grown men, like, for example, one of them was an emergency team leader up the McKinsey, like 15, 20 years, worked for the fire crew, did training operations, cold water rescue, you name it. David had seen it. And he had something like this happen. And he says, they want me to go. I can't take another step. And there's nothing in the trees. And I watched this grown man say, I'm going to cry. Why the F am I going to cry? And he tucked his head into his shoulders and ran down the hill, grabbed his partner, and left. And it took about two weeks for him to come back to the area. And he came back with like an 8-foot long spear that he'd made. And I was like, what is happening right now? Like, what are you going to do with that anyway? Like, they're just going to use it as a toothpick, or you're going to look like a shish kebab. So, but this is the thing, is that they don't need to do anything to you physically because they've done it to you emotionally. And there is a visceral emotional connection to leave that is supernatural. Just like when somebody walks into an oppressive demonic house, right? Like a lot of tarry blackness going on in this room. And it's just like, oh my God, I'm going to get sick. I can't stay in here. Well, they can project that into your mind. Just like, you are going to have the worst day of your life, and I'm not going to tell you why. You're not going to see me. And I will kill you and your whole family if you take another step. Don't do it. And you know what? I think the reason why is they have a family unit there. And they see people that come in with weird intentions that are scared and armed. Because everybody that got sent down the mountain with me so far has been an alpha male with a pistol. And I think there might be something about that. Yeah. And it makes perfect sense, right?
I was up elk hunting, and we smelled something going down into the canyon that I'd never smelled before, ever. And I could bottom, and the elk were.
She's freezing up on me a little bit, Brooke.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. I think the Bigfoots are getting a hold of you, Kimberly,
I know.
in a special place.
Sorry,
There
I
you go.
just lost
That's
my
okay.
internet. So the fog was moving through, and all we could see was the elk, their hooves coming through there. So we waited not to get them, to spook them out of there, and walk it out after dark. And when we were coming up the trail, we got the warning. We started smelling it again, and a big branch, like 50 yards in front of us, got slammed to the ground. We heard a snap, crack, and slammed down. And that's when
Wow.
we took the flashlight to look, and then my flashlight hit its eyes, and then that's when the fear was there projected. So it's interesting you said that, because we were in there, and I think it was following the elk herd that was down in there. So that was my one time.
I mean, there's a lot of people. I just got done. There was I think it was definitely a Protestant pastor from Roseburg, Oregon. I just got done emceeing a convention in Oregon, and this pastor showed up. He was a huge fan of the subject matter, and Ron Moorhead was there, so he wanted to meet a legend of Bigfoot, and MK Davis, another legend. This pastor came up and he, earnestly was telling me, I love the subject matter. I love what you guys are into. I've been following your work in the Owl Moon Lab. And he goes, you ever consider the fact that you're dealing with Nephilim? And this is an ongoing thing that even I have struggled with, exactly the nature of the beast. Like, what is going on here? They seem to have all these puzzling powers, and they're total tricksters. Like, we ultimately do not know what these things are. There are no experts, because these things will not let you know very much about them unless you're at it for years. And then you get things like a name, or then you get healed, right? Like healings, dramatic, impressive, spontaneous healings. So those things exist. But, the men of renown, as far as the book of Genesis, begot a time where a third of the angels came and basically took over the world and begot women against their will and made hybrids. And so this is the idea of the Nephilim, the giants, the red-headed giants. And that story goes back eons to when the Vikings ruled the earth. And the Vikings were red-headed giants, by the way. But then you talk about things like trolls, and you have the Urin, which is like the Himalayan Sasquatch, different than the Yeti. So this idea of the other set apart that has magical monkey powers with mostly animalistic behavior, but then this like real humanity, perplexes those that are religious, and they just basically say demon, and it's just like the only word they know.
Yeah.
But what I've found here, as a guy that grew up in a Baptist church, is that you can't take this issue to your pastor, because they don't know what to do with it. And the other thing too is that most of this phenomena is completely benign and neutral.
Yeah.
If you allow it to be, you become the demon. That's what I've noticed, is that humans become the a-holes, not the spirits. They turn people into, neurotic a-holes. Like the I can't even preach this enough, is that most people feel as though they become special because they've experienced the miraculous. But the miraculous can be experienced by anybody for a fleeting second, or by like something profound like the Owl Moon Lab. It was only just my consistent, basically hounding of the subject matter to have a sighting. And some people should not have this phenomena in their life at all, because it ruins them. They once were decent. And I think it loves to, and maybe you guys can respond to this too, is that the supernatural in general loves to trick the ego of people and turn them into something that is just totally disgusting. So I don't know. That response from you guys as ghost hunters.
Yeah.
We're
Kimberly
going
and I
through a
talk
phase of
about
that
it all
right
the
now.
time. Yeah. We have a conversation about it all the time, Kim and I. So it's very prevalent. So I think it's interesting, because it's probably just human nature on a certain level to get like scooped up with your ego, because not only you're saying you're seeing it in your field, but like it's in the paranormal, it's like rampant in the paranormal world as well.
Honestly, I don't think it's a bad thing, Toby, only because you start seeing a shift between people who are full of shit. Sorry
Mhm.
for saying that, to the ones who really want to research. And I think it's going to come back to the ones who really want to research, because they're going to be tired of seeing all that being blasted.
Yeah.
And people are going to really want to get back to the real meat of stuff.
Mhm.
And it's
And you know, this
happen that
whatever's
way.
going on here is these things do not like their image photographed, but
Mhm.
humans do. And as soon as you start taking a picture of a human, it bloviates their ego to the nth degree, where they think that somehow their image means something. But to Sasquatch, it means nothing. And maybe it's because they want to steer clear of the ego.
Mhm.
That's something that just kind of struck me, is just like,
Just got to chill.
you know, we used to hang mirrors. Like we'd go to the Dollar General and buy jars of peanut butter, use those to communicate and gift with them. Always leave the lid on so they would unscrew it. And then we would leave up mirrors in the forest to see what they would do with their own reflection. And on one occasion, you could see this oily fingerprint, which we call alba vernix, which means like a greasy, waxy white sebum. We also see this with hauntings, like things with ectoplasm, or what Dan Aykroyd would call spirit jelly.
Yeah.
Sasquatch also has this, and so do the non-human aliens. So they're again connected, but also leaving these mirrors up. For the most case, they would take the mirrors down and they would break them, or they would lay them face down. In fact, I'm a chainsaw artist, and I carve Bigfoot heads, like sculptures of them, mask. And on 4 occasions to clients, I sold these rather large cedar heads, right? Like pretty big, over 24 inches. They've taken these sculptures. Now, I assume it's probably Sasquatch, no way to know. But in 4 different cases, they have taken the sculptures and placed them face down in different areas of the yard, house, or forest. And I assume it's probably them, because these are all people that are totally obsessed with the subject matter. And so what is that? Why do they avoid cameras, mirrors, and representations of themselves? There's really no reason. An animal doesn't do that. You catch an animal on camera, you see them in a mirror. So what is that? Like if you want to record a Bigfoot, you better have a $4,000 FLIR, like I just picked up. By the
Yeah.
way, I'm so tickled right now that I have a $4,000 FLIR behind this
They are
camera.
expensive.
Like this is like military grade FLIR. It's actually X-ray. It's not even just a FLIR. It's like an X-ray FLIR. We can see through walls with this thing. And so you better have a unit like this, or you
Yeah.
better, be lucky. Like that's all it is luck. I think they can read your mind. So luck is hard to come by with them. They seem to make mistakes, but very rarely. Like they are demigods. This is why the Nephilim thing may be a part of this conversation, right? Is because they have godlike abilities, including omniscience, because they
Okay.
don't seem to look at time as a construct. It's a human thing. They don't experience time. Like when they want to do something, they've thought it out, like before you've gone into the forest, and they've known you've coming, And
Yeah.
so this is why the male ego is so fragile.
Yeah.
And the female ego too, to be fair. Like I've met some really bullheaded women in this community that are just like intolerable, insufferable. But there's a lot of people that are also into the woo that are just as
Yeah.
insufferable, because they think this phenomena is completely earth and light and new age, and it's
Yeah.
not. This is a hardcore, top secret, deep, very deep phenomena, much deeper than most people would ever be able to really deal with. And so maybe we should play another sound to show how deep.
Yeah, let's do that. So this next sound, and you can tell us afterwards kind of what's going on here.
Pull it back just a little bit. There you go.
Is
So
that the
that would
whole?
be that's a
Yeah.
typical, you know, roar, I guess we would call it. That one was actually purchased after Daryl Adams recorded it with his parabolic dish, which is, I don't think you guys use parabolic dishes when you're inside a haunted house, but maybe it might yield some interesting results.
I actually
It's
have
a
a parabolic.
Okay, so and you can just take
Yeah.
a simple digital recorder, or I think you can actually anything that has a mic head, and I mean a headphone slot with an AC adapter, and you can record sound outwards for miles. And so, but this sound was recorded behind the house, and
Wow.
it's an incredible moment of what we would call like a very significant tonal resonance from a large primate with a giant lung capacity. You can't say who
Yeah.
did it or what did it. We can't even really say that it's not somebody call blasting, which is, eliciting
Yeah.
Bigfoot sounds with a speaker. Maybe it's that. But the sounds that we record were close at range. And so that's what that's my girlfriend, by the way. She was just over at Goodwill picking up some stuff. So she
Hi,
got it in the
Alicia.
car. Now she's going to Fred Meyer's. But anyway, so yeah, that
Get
was
peanut butter.
that sound was actually picked up by Expedition Bigfoot. They licensed that sound from us for season 1 through 3. So as you're watching Expedition Bigfoot, that's the Al Moon roar that Daryl Adams recorded,
nice.
the opening sequence.
That's pretty
That's
incredible. I think we have
I know
one
that-
more as well. What were you going to say,
There-
Kim?
I was just gonna say, as far as the woo goes, I do subscribe to how the Lakota look at them as being like guardians of some kind,
Mhm.
I know each native tribe has their own type of take on it, but they all believe, and I tend to think like that. I just feel like they're onto something there. It's just old. It's really old energy.
Yeah. I also
Yeah.
find it interesting, Toby, that you had mentioned the thing about the cameras and the mirrors and all of that, because from my understanding, many tribes also did not like that sort of thing. Didn't like their pictures taken and didn't, some people believed that it would steal their soul.
So
It's kind of interesting the parallels with those as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and maybe not so much steal your soul as like warp it and infuse ego into it. And that's, this is what these First Nations people are trying to do, and it's be enlightened through altering their mind, through
Right.
music or substance, vision questing, as it were. And maybe they saw something in us, just like, oh my gosh, why are you guys appreciating your beauty so much? Photograph, like the first selfies, right? Probably freaked out the Native Americans. And so
Right.
I think there may be something to this with Sasquatch, and maybe something to this with all the other phenomena, because they're just as hard to catch on camera. But Bigfoot is like this unique category, because a lot of people are scared to go in the woods, as to where they can sit in their backyard and have a ghost encounter and shoot the sky. And it's it's at a distance, right? Most of the time. But this is like, you have to go in the woods and like be with them. And so, yeah.
I feel like from the family that I used to be a part of, they homesteaded the northern side of the Bighorns, and they were raised with the Crow Indians, and that's what they call them. Anyway, so they have this connection with Bigfoot, the way they think down there. And my ex-in-laws, when they were outfitting, they actually would be looking at a moose for guiding, getting ready to like keep an eye on a moose for somebody for guiding and stuff. And as they were looking at this one down in the canyon, all of a sudden a Bigfoot stood up behind the moose, which was laying there, got up and walked out. They never saw it until he got up. He was camouflaged. And so they talk about stories like this all the time, that we may not see them and they may be right there. I don't understand that either, but the people that I was around, it's like you and I having a conversation every day. It's just a matter of fact kind of thing. They see them, they know they're there, they respect them. And so the camouflage thing, when people are, how many times you go in the woods, you may be standing next to something and not even know it. That's That's always when I go in the mountains down, like,
Mhm.
the animals aren't making any
Yeah.
sounds. I wonder if it's a mountain lion or something else.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
we had a chance to interview a guy by the name of Joel Hynek. And I'm a pretty big nerd of old UFO lore, including what the DoD has done along the years to try to debunk witnesses. And back in the 60s and 50s, there was a program called Project Blue Book, and a
Yeah.
guy by the name of J. Allen Hynek ran the program. J. Allen Hynek became a believer in the subject matter after he left the DoD and started researching it. Also has a cameo in Close Encounters of the Third Kind on top of Devil's Tower. And his son, Joel Hynek, is an Oscar award-winning special effects creator for such movies as Matrix. He created the bullet that kind of flies through Neo's camera frame. That was Joel Hynek, J. Allen Hynek's son. And then he created the Predator effect. So they didn't know how to make, Arnold Schwarzenegger confused by someone in camouflage. So Joel Hynek created this whole idea of like, well, let's bend light around something that's invisible and it'll show this ghostly. Well, so we interviewed Joel about witnesses that see this with Sasquatch. They describe exactly what he created. And so the biggest question was, did Joel create something that Dad had talked about around the dinner table with the phenomena? And he said no, which I thought for sure he'd say yes. But he said no. But he said, the footage that you're showing me, the footage from Greenwater, right? Like Barb Shoop, one of the witnesses from Greenwater, who recorded what we call the cloaker from Greenwater, right behind the tavern, confounded and confused an Oscar award-winning director who created two of the most badass films ever. And he watched this little gal from Greenwater totally confound him with her iPod Touch, was filmed in like 2011.
Mhm.
And so he looked at the metadata, he looked at the footage, and he goes, I guess if her phone was somehow taken by like a Chinese spy and sent back to the iPhone headquarters over there, and they reprogrammed it so the metadata said this, then it's possible she could have hoaxed it. But short of that, you
wow.
can't yeah. So really interesting stuff. So, now we're into cloaking. And so this is stuff that we dealt with at the L Moon Lab. I mean, we have a lot of sounds, we have over 1,200 hours worth of audio. And as people that listen to EVPs, I don't know if I included one of that. We haven't even talked about the amount of poltergeist and ghostly activity we had, spirit activity, apportations. Probably some of the most clear EVPs ever recorded in all of history were recorded in the little town of Cottage Grove at the Al Moon Lab,
Wow.
all by accident. And they're long, clear, synthesized conversations about us or about the environment or in a language I've never heard of before. They would hijack our voice like AI would hijack your voice now, but this is like 2017, 18. And they would hijack our voice, the phenomena, and insert our voice into another language we didn't understand and put it into a camera roll on our phone with no timestamp or no date stamp, no timestamp, just a black screen with just the audio. And so how is Bigfoot related to that? Shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Makes you question the whole paranormal world, doesn't it? You're not
Yeah.
just messing with spirits. People might be labeling it one thing and they could be all wrong, when they're
Yeah.
going out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff was so good out there that it's kind of frustrating not to want to share it all the time. But now, like, I've kind of had to move on because I don't live there anymore. Eventually, the property sold. And it's kind of interesting because after the property sold, a couple from Beverly Hills came up and bought this little farmhouse. And they turned, like, the most haunted part of this place we haven't even talked about was the metal garage. And that's where a lot of the activity would coalesce on the outside and the inside, including ectoplasm, which was collected on top of a magnetic ball that rolled inexplicably across the floor. and then another one jumped onto a metal wall and stuck there about 3 feet up, okay, with spirit jelly attached to it. So
Wow.
so this couple from Beverly Hills ends up buying Daryl's home after he moves to Oklahoma, and they turn the garage into a library dedicated to H.P. Lovecraft, like the king of occult paranormal activity. And so like here's my feeling is that this house is effed with people. This land has effed with people since the dawn of man. And so there were Indians with teepees there going, what the F? There before that, there were probably like Vikings there going, what the F? And so this has been a what the F situation in this area in Cottage Grove for who knows, hundreds of thousands of years possibly.
Wow.
That's
So
incredible.
now, do you think there's something, have you guys done anything with the land to see if there's any magnetic stuff underneath? Like, you know, how you have EMFs more, is there anything tied to that area? Any extra like ore down in the ground? Any kind of like
Yeah.
limestone? Have you done
It's
any of that?
yeah, so it's golden quartz underneath a
Okay.
flowing river. And it's
Oh,
also in
boy.
the middle of a parabolic dish-shaped geology. So, you know, these are called telluric fields, right? Like, so you
Yeah.
have flowing current over golden quartz with artesian springs pushing up. So constant
Wow.
pressure. And then you have these ridges on the side of old growth trees, which are giant antennas. And so it's just a constant telluric energy, in my opinion, probably from a
Perfect storm.
meteoric impact, and it's a meteoric impact. This is the same work that Travis Taylor has done as well on Skinwalker Ranch. These are his findings. I believe this is why power spots exist, is that they've been
Interesting.
geomanced, right? So they've been spiritually effed with based upon the size and the structure of the geology, just like Stonehenge has. And so they're accessing what is there, and they're making it, these are the wisdom keepers, right? Is that they're building upon what is already there to make it more magical.
Okay. This is interesting because it just came out, this place where all these sightings were that I know of for Bigfoot. They are going in and they just opened a mine for rare minerals that they just found there. It's one of the biggest ones in the United States. And I thought, oh, wow, that's the side where the whole family has had all their experiences. But they also saw like a cigar shaped spaceship there. And they deny this. They're not the kind of people who talk about this. They deny it if you asked them.
Right.
It's kept the family stuff. But it's interesting because the strange lights are out there. That's been seen by people. And then there's that. And the stories go back from generations, from since the time that they homesteaded. And so now you're throwing in the ground, the geological stuff into it now. So there's a lot of layers to all this. There's a lot. You take a deep dive, a real deep dive.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, before I ask Toby kind of a final couple questions, we are going to pop in a couple of our sponsors real quick, if you don't mind, y'all. And the first sponsor here from CL, who owns Eerie Expeditions magazine.
To explore the unknown, dive into the world of the strange, mysterious, and unexplained with Eerie Expeditions magazine. Each issue is packed with spine-tingling tales, cutting-edge paranormal investigations, and exclusive insights into hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and more. Whether you're a seasoned investigator or just love a good ghost story, Eerie Expeditions magazine has something for you. Join our growing community of truth seekers and adventure lovers. Subscribe today at EerieExpeditionsMagazine.com and unlock the secrets of the supernatural. Are you ready? That's EerieExpeditionsMagazine.com, where the extraordinary is just a click away. Dare to discover.
Introducing the latest generation of the SLS cameras from Horn Paranormal. The new SS SLS camera features SLS mapping and full spectrum capabilities with built-in IR lighting. See more at hornparanormal.com or hornparanormal.shop.
All right, awesome.
You
So,
didn't have
Toby-
your commercial on there, Brooke.
Oh, I'm good. I'll do it next time.
Okay.
So, Toby, you've been an amazing guest tonight. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Honestly, I feel like we could talk to you forever. You're very educated, deeply educated on the subject. And I feel like there's so much more that you could talk to us about. So I feel like there's definitely room in the future for you to please come back again and talk some more about this subject. But I know that a lot of people think that the Pacific Northwest tends to be like what people think of when they think of Bigfoot, especially in, North America, right? So I would say in the United States, besides the Pacific Northwest, what do you think would be the biggest hotspot, or what do you feel like has been touted as one of the bigger hotspots for paranormal, for Bigfoot sightings other than the Pacific Northwest?
Oklahoma,
Yeah.
that
Oh.
area, Nebraska, places where you wouldn't expect it, cornfield areas, flatland, the Nevada desert. People don't expect that. That's a huge hot spot.
Interesting.
So yeah, it doesn't really matter about cover because these things are accessing space and time. And yes, they pop in and out of the forest, but they also do so in cornfields, in people's living rooms. We haven't talked about that, but it turns out that they don't need to open your door to come in. They can walk through walls. And it's just reminiscent of all these things that we've talked about. These things don't care about your beliefs. They write their own rules. And we're just here to explore it as deep as they'll let us.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Toby. Can you tell everybody where everyone here is going to be able to find all of your content, where they can watch you?
Yes, your book.
Your book, all of it.
Yeah. So my book is called The Al Moon Lab, A Paranormal Experiment. You can find it wherever crazy books are sold. That's available. Working on the audio book, working on Olympic Strange Days, a book about the strange experiences out here in the Olympic Peninsula, coming out in 2026. 100 short stories about 100 weird places out here in the OP. And then Voices in the Wilderness. This documentary is the story of the American West, set in the Sierra Nevadas, around 9,000 feet up, where since the 1950s, hunters have been experiencing aliens in concert with Sasquatch and developing a unique relationship with the phenomena. And so Voices in the Wilderness will hit the theaters in the end of 2025, the beginning in 2026. We haven't wrapped yet, but that's probably the most important film to date.
I'll wait to see that. Seriously.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today, Toby. We had the best time and learning all about Bigfoot and so many different aspects of it. So we will see you all next month in August 18th for our next episode. And
Buddy, sorry we didn't get to the
Nice to meet